Hey guys, I'm back with another rant video. I swear I don't want this to become the norm for my channel, but I just felt the overwhelming need to talk about this topic. And this time I have expressive drawings so you can watch my persona flail around while I rant. Much more fun, right? So before I talk about the subject in question, I have to explain Warrior Cat's Ultimate Edition, or just Ultimate Edition for short. For those of you that don't know what it is, it's an online Roblox game based off of the Warrior series where you can design and roleplay your Warriors OCs. It's actually fairly well made, with competent developers and good graphics, and I'm here to tell you to not play it. There's been a problem festering with the game for more than 2 years at this point. The fact that the developers won't add its rules into the game itself. Oh no, I don't mean the game doesn't have rules. They have plenty of rules against basic things like harassment and trolling, and even a few guidelines specific to the game that elaborate on a few things. These rules just aren't listed in the game itself, only accessible through Discord. Yeah, you gotta abide by rules that most people can't even read. The severity of this issue is a lot worse than it seems, for various reasons that I'll highlight in this video. And for those of you who think I'm ranting because the rules don't ban non-cats or don't ban non-clan names and clans or don't ban Lunas, you are so far off from my point that you might as well be in another galaxy. You'll hear why in a bit. For now, we'll start with the timeline. Ultimate Edition began in its beta version on August 15, 2019. The game was going through hefty development as the developers worked on the models, furs, accessories, scars, map, and other various elements of the game. Things were constantly replaced, redone, taken out, or added in. Naturally, with all this going on, rules were very low priority for the developers. They decided to only create and release the rules once the game itself was also finished and released. The fanbase was fine with this. After all, the game was still in development, and there were many other things to focus on. People hung on to the promise that the developers made. Rules would release as soon as the game did. And then release came on May 7th, 2021. But a few players were surprised to discover that nothing about the game had changed to include rules. Instead, the developers had implemented all the rules in their Discord server. When the obvious problem about readability and accessibility of the rules was pointed out, players were reassured that rules would come about in the game eventually. It's been 6 months since that time, and there are still no rules. There were a few flare-ups of protest in the Discord's feedback channel about the missing rules since then, but nothing's ever really come of it except the mods trying to quell players and assuring them that the rules are indeed coming. As for the developers, we've heard nothing but radio silence from them on this topic. This total lack of communication is enough to get some users angry beyond shallow reassurances, but instead of at all explaining why rules are being delayed, or what the upsides are of having no rule list, the mods have shockingly chosen to fire back at the user base instead. Their main argument is that rules are useless, because all the offenses of harassment and trolling and such are already reportable anyway in their game reports section of the Discord. They argue that rules would not change anything about the game's issues, and only the appearance of a moderator would be effective against rule breakers. This fallacious argument leads to my next point. To get straight to the main point, this reasoning falls flat on its face. There's the short way and the long way of disproving it. To show the short way first, all you need to do is ask, and what is the advantage of having lower accessibility for rules? No, seriously, I want an answer to this question. Why is this the hill that the devs and mods chose to die on? What is so important about keeping the rules away from the game? Especially when they're so easy to implement, even if they are close to useless. Which do you think is more difficult for a developer to implement? A Prey update with fully functioning AI, a vast array of new models with both idle and running animations, and new animations and systems for the player to catch, hold, and eat prey? Or an update where they add a new button that opens a few paragraphs of text with the word rules slapped on top? Okay, now what do you think the devs are prioritizing right now? This alone should be enough to argue my point, but I'll be indulgent and dig deeper. The insistence that every single rule breaker is a feral animal that can't be contained by anything but hero moderators busting in with a kick command and ban command is an insult, not just to the rule breakers themselves, but the entire community. It's important to consider the broader context of the Warriors fandom as a whole. Ultimate Edition is just the newest generation of thousands of games, forums, discords, and other role-playing sites designed for the Warriors fandom. Thus, a huge percentage of its player base is inherited by players from that fandom. Even discounting the wider fandom it caters to, Ultimate Edition has an actual history as a game. It's a descendant of Forest Territory, the old TubeCat game with the triangle map, and that game was a descendant of Mandaka's Lake, an older TubeCat game for Warriors made back circa 2010. The community for Ultimate Edition, while it has some new faces from the main page of Roblox, is generally not first generation. And this is where the root of the issue is. The games that Ultimate Edition is descended from, and the role-playing expectations of the fandom that surrounds it, are rarely ever welcoming. They ban non-cats, they ban non-clan names, they ban rearranging the ranks, they ban special powers, outside of main character prophecy roleplays where only a few players are important. They ban just about everything outside of the box. This mindset was carried into Ultimate Edition as it had been for so many years, festering in one game before jumping to the next like a virus. And this is where the rules become absolutely critical. It's very important to have even just a few paragraphs of text somewhere in the game to elaborate that things that may seem banned, or things that one may assume are banned, are actually very much allowed. Non-cats are the most pristine example of this. Non-cats were a no-go for many Warriors games and forums throughout the fandom's history, including Forest Territory and Mandaka's Lake. The closest you could get to non-cat role-playing was pretending there was an NPC fox ravaging your territory. However, on Ultimate Edition, non-cats have not been banned. If anything, they have been encouraged as a new form of creativity and out-of-the-box thinking. They attract many new players, and grant so many more roleplay opportunities. This was a revolutionary concept that Ultimate Edition embraced. That is, unless you aren't in its Discord, where the hotspot of the non-cat community is. If you play the game itself, which never explicitly covers the fact that non-cats, or any traditionally banned ideas, are allowed, you will very often face debilitating harassment, social isolation, and even death threats. Yes, people have received death threats. I personally have even been followed onto an unrelated banana game and berated by someone who is angry at me for being a leader as a squirrel. It's worth mentioning that they didn't even see me leading. Their friend just shared a short video of me, and they were mad enough to act out. And that is where rules will come in handy. I cannot stress the amount of times I've been viciously attacked on the game by anti-non-cats. And when I try to say that non-cats aren't banned, they insist, but where does it say that? Why wouldn't it be in the game? This response only elevates my point that these people aren't malicious at heart. They're not trolls. They genuinely believe that this is the way the game is, because that's how it's always been. But no, I'm not here to defend gatekeepers and toxic fans. They're awful in their own right, and they hurt a lot of people. What I'm actually willing to do is to stand here and say that plenty of them, I don't know how many, maybe a majority or maybe a minority, but still some, are only misguided. They've never been exposed to a Warriors game as free as Ultimate Edition, and they clash so hard with what they see on it. Not because they want to break the rules, quite the opposite in fact. They think they're upholding the rules, and there's nothing in plain sight to prove them wrong. And even after we get a mod on them to tell them that it is indeed allowed, they don't suddenly learn their lesson and make a complete switch out of nowhere. They go back to their friend group, they rant about how incompetent the mods are, they gossip about the non-cats they still want gone. They're deterred from touching non-cats for a while after the show of power, but with no rules to serve as a constant reminder, and with tons of fellow gatekeepers to keep them company and reinforce their mindset, it's only a matter of time before they grow bold enough again. This isn't even counting all the cases lost to time, where people too young to be in the Discord, or who simply are ignorant of the Discord's existence, get successfully bullied out of a roleplay by gatekeepers who don't have anyone around to report and handle the incident. And that brings me to the victims themselves. Not everyone has Discord, whether it be because of age or simply because they usually don't join the Discords for the games they play. They are completely in the dark about the rules, so when a large group of people overwhelmingly attack them for playing as their non-cat character, where is the reference point to tell them that they're absolutely allowed to be their OC? If anything, not having listed rules runs the risk of this person not only ditching their non-cat OCs, but becoming one of the gatekeeper crowd and harassing other people for having non-cat OCs. This is a story I've actually very commonly heard from ex-gatekeepers who say that they thought non-cats were banned because other people told them, and there was no rule list around them to say otherwise. People who defend the lack of a rule list insist that the situation will resolve itself because there are other people who could recognize the harassment and report it or put a stop to it. But to me, it's rather concerning that the only chance of justice lies in charity with fellow players, not in giving the victim the tools to know their victim, or the harasser the tools to know their harasser. Believe it or not, Ultimate Edition is not an isolated scenario. There are other games where the same thing has played out, and believe me, it's never been pretty. Rules on roleplay games is a tale as old as time. Something I've heard over and over again from anti-ruleless people is that rules will not stop all harassers from harassing people. They insist that a rule list would be useless since they can't stop every case of rule breaking. And frankly, it's insulting that this is an argument at all. We know it won't stop everything. If it did, then there would never be any rule breaking at all in roleplay games with rule lists. What we're saying is that not all rule breakers are rabid, frothing predators who won't listen to anything except a moderator's holy word. There are some good people in the mix who have genuinely been led astray, as I've already explained, and to say that a rule list won't stop anything at all is as bad as saying it will stop everything. If it did stop nothing, then no roleplay game would have a rule list, as it would serve no point. But tons do. In fact, let me give you a list of roleplay games with rule lists. Starship Roleplay, HCR 146, Emissary. Kingdom Life. Helix Ascent. Star Wars Clone Wars Roleplay. Creepypasta Life Roleplay. The Promised Neverland Roleplay Group. Clear Skies Over Milwaukee. How to Train Your Dragon Roleplay, Burke's Dragons. Wings of Fire Roleplay. Five Nights at Freddy's Roleplay. Gotcha Online. Cookie Run Roleplay. Damn, I guess all these games are just wasting their time. They could just as easily put these rules into their Discord, but their developers don't have their priorities straight. Curse the devs for not giving them endless flashy new updates, and instead prioritizing player-based safety. Such awful people. But you know what game does do the same thing as Ultimate Edition? After the Flash. They keep all their rules in the Discord, and oh boy do they pay the price. It is very common in the game to auto-kill others and harass them in and out of roleplay, then play God and taunt them for not knowing the Discord-only rules. They hold it over less experienced roleplayers' heads, making life hell for anyone who doesn't have the Discord, whether due to age or choice. And of course, just like I've already said for Ultimate Edition, these players didn't even know they were victims, because they didn't have a way to prove the others wrong. This shit causes players to leave the game. I already have a friend who left after the Flash because of the chaotic no-rule state of the game, and insists they may leave Ultimate Edition as well due to seeing the same pattern of behavior repeat itself there. And it honestly makes me sad, because a roleplay game as good as Ultimate Edition doesn't deserve to suffer this fate to a mistake so minor. I'm sure you all know the conclusion of this. Blah blah blah, put the rules in the game. It's not hard, it can only help, and it will prevent the game from going down the very sinister and toxic path that its brethren, like After the Flash and Forest Territory, did. Even if there are no results from adding rules, I'd much rather that than continue keeping the game without rules and the possibility that things could markedly improve with them. And yes, I'm willing to put everything else in Ultimate Edition on hold for this. Remodel update, prey update, season update, all of this comes second to player-based safety. I would not mind having to wait a little longer for the next flashy cosmetics if it means I have a chance at a more positive user experience. What's the point of having an awesome game if you can barely play it without getting attacked? Thank you all for taking the time to listen, and I encourage everyone to spread this message to other users and make more people aware of the situation. A single change could save the game from a lot of heartache down the line. Until next time.